Welcome back to Driving Success, a Fleet Advantage podcast, a show where we bring you expert insights in the latest trends in fleet management and transportation. I'm your host, Tracy Derival, and big news hit the transportation industry in late January, and it's shaking up corporate transportation fleets and key stakeholders across the country. CARB has rescinded their waiver requests from EPA in regard to the ACF Advanced Clean Fleet Regulation. But what does that actually mean for your fleet? Today, we are going to cut through all of the noise and get straight to the facts. How will this change impact your fleet? What is the best strategy moving forward? What if you already started planning? What should you do next? Joining me today to break it all down is our returning guest, Brian Antonellis, who is our Senior Vice President of Fleet Operations here at Fleet Advantage, who also has been keeping track of all things CARB and EPA and keeping us informed for almost 2 years. He will be helping us understand the implications of this shift and what organizations with fleets need to know moving forward. This is definitely a conversation that everyone in the industry needs to hear. So let's jump right in. Hi, Brian. Thank you so much for coming on the show today. We're glad to have you back on so that we can have this important conversation.
Hey, thanks for having me.
Awesome. So let's dive into the episode. Can you tell us exactly what happened with the CARB mandate and how does it affect the other mandates? But before you answer those questions, can you give us and in the audience a quick little refresher on the CARB mandate?
Sure. So the way I think about it, there's 3 pieces that are included in CARB. There's ACT, which is Advanced Clean Truck, and that really regulates the OEM and their percentage of EVs versus diesels that they have to sell in any given state. So that ratio could go anywhere from 3-to-1 up to 20-to-1. There's the omnibus portion of it, which is where California and the CARB states wanted to run a lower emissions level than the normal EPA, right? And then there's Advanced Clean Fleet. Advanced Clean Fleet is the one that's made the news for everybody over the past couple weeks. And that waiver request was rescinded by California. And that request was initially to go to the EPA to say, we would like to impose these regulations on fleets, knowing that there was going to be an administration change and they weren't going to support that. Instead of EPA or California requesting the waiver and then having the new administration come in and say, we don't support this, we're going to rescind it, they just stopped and said, let's let the new administration get into place, and then they'll kind of reset where they're at. So today, the waiver for EPA has not been requested, nor has it been granted.
Okay. So 2 are still moving forward and just that one mandate.
That's correct.
All right. What is the status now and how does that impact companies with fleets?
Well, it's a confusing time right now. So while the fleets may not have the mandate to transition to EV or non-emissions vehicles by 2035, which was built into ACF, if they still have to buy EVs as a percentage of their total purchases within those states, it's kind of challenging to figure out what that looks like. Over the next few months, we hope to get clarity out of CARB and the EPA around how they're really going to enforce and move forward. There's been a lot of exceptions over the past several years as production timing and the new technology either came a little quicker or came a little slower. But, for us, we keep on going back and saying you have to have a 5-year plan and a 5-year strategy, because today it's an ACF waiver getting rescinded. We hear tariffs coming up in the news a lot now, so how that's going to affect pricing. And then during this whole process, customers have dramatic changes in just their business, how many trucks they're going to need. So certainly an interesting time, and you want to make sure that as you're going through the process, placing your order, you understand how those regulations are going to affect you, how the changes are going to affect you, and then really build that into your strategy.
Right. How should they move forward? I know you mentioned a 5-year plan, but now moving on from this situation, how do you think these organizations should go about planning and strategizing?
Sure. Well, it's hard because there's some gray area that's out there today. But just like we talked about before, I think probably the most important thing is to develop that 5-year plan, have it data-based so you understand the cost of change going forward. If you're going to, increase the number of alternative fuel vehicles you're going to go in to your fleet, how that's going to affect it, understand how many diesels you're going to need. Hey, I got to buy 5 or 6 EVs within California to get the number of diesel trucks I need. And then if you can lay that out, you can match it with your infrastructure, because several times, in many cases, those take 18 to 24, even 36 months to put in place. So you really have to have a long-term view of it. And then when we get these changes, don't overreact. We're not going back and rebuilding the whole plan. What we're doing is saying, okay, maybe the number of EVs or the number of diesels going into a particular state has to change, but you don't have to go back to step one, right? We're just constantly evolving your plan as these changes happen.
Okay. Now, another question that I have is, how can transportation fleets try to find the balance between having long-term sustainability goals as they face these immediate cost pressures?
No, good question. There's one thing to have an EV mandate or requirement, but companies do want to look for alternative fuels. They want to look at what their future is going to be. We've continued to say it's probably not 100% diesel like we see today. We're going to have some sort of blend. You're going to have EV, you're going to have some hydrogen, you're going to have natural gas. So when they think about those goals, it rolls right into your 5-year plan. Where do you want to be? What percentage of your fleet do you want to transition? And if a CARB state mandate, maybe it's a 10-to-1 ratio. Well, that's just sort of the floor. This is what you have to do to be able to put diesels in that state. But you may want to go more. You may want to go less. You may want to spread them across the board. You may want to shift your type of vehicle that you're running in that particular state. So just because the requirement, that's just sort of the floor to enter to talk about it, but it should be included in your 5-year plan. And one of the pieces that I know I touched on a few minutes ago, but infrastructure. If you say you want to buy an EV truck today, it could be somewhere between 18, 24, even 36 months, depending on the state and how much they've invested into trying to support the new changes in the new infrastructure. So it's a long-term plan to add those to your fleet, and you need to make sure that they're part of your 5-year strategy.
Right. Now, as we wrap up this episode, I wanted to ask you, did you have any final thoughts on this matter? Anything you wanted to share with our viewers or listeners?
Yeah, so if you're sitting out there and you're thinking, what can I do today to help me prepare for this? Because obviously the ACF created a lot of news. It's all about making sure that you start to do the work to develop that 5-year plan. So it's not about saying, it's part of it is saying how many trucks do I want and where are they going to go? But you have to understand the cost of change. So you got to understand how much is an EV going to cost compared to a diesel? How much is the infrastructure going to cost? Where is it going to go? And doing all that pre-work now to make sure you have your data correct, you have your fleet list correct, and they're all feeding a good strategy is something we can do today so that, as the changes come towards us, we're not going back and trying to correct data and errors. We can have a understanding of where we're going to be if we do nothing, and here's what change looks like going forward.
Now, Brian, we just want to say thank you again for coming on the show today and really sharing some valuable insights and your expertise on all of the recent changes on the CARB mandate. We really appreciate your time.
Thanks for having me.
We hope today's discussion has helped clarify the latest regulatory shifts and provided some actionable insights for navigating the changes ahead. If you found value in today's episode, please share, like, and leave a review. You can listen to us on Spotify, iHeartRadio, and Apple Podcasts. You can watch this episode on our social media platforms such as YouTube, LinkedIn, Facebook, and X. Until next time, let's continue to drive solutions together.